right, everyone, welcome to the Course of Action podcast. Today, my guest is none other than the author of Shadow Tier, former Green Beret, and contractor, tons of military experience in and out of uniform, Steve Stratton. Steve, what's going on, man?
How you doing, Jeff? Doing great here. Just wading through the snow that happened last night here in Denver. Pretty crazy. They call it a spring snow, but I think they're a little late on the spring thing. So,
Yeah, I remember when I lived in Colorado Springs, they were telling me, like, don't like get all your summer stuff out just yet. Like, we had snow in June, and I was like, what? And then it
go
snowed in
plant
like
your
the first,
garden.
yeah, it snowed like the first week of September, and I was like, in Oklahoma, like it starts creeping up into the 80s consistently in September, and in Colorado, it's snowing the first week of September, and then we went on to get several inches of snow, and I was like, this is insane. I enjoyed it because I like being cold more than I like being hot, but you know, the snow up there, it was a different kind of snow too. Like snow here in Oklahoma was it's nasty snow. It's not snow you can enjoy. It's icy. It doesn't pack, or if it does pack, it just turns into ice. Like it's a different kind of snow. So Colorado is beautiful. I really do miss it.
Yeah, it's a great state. Unfortunately, I think my son planted his garden a little too early. As his backyard looks like there's a bunch of GP mediums around the garden and stuff like that. But hopefully, some of it survives. So.
Yeah, we had to learn about a thing called what was it called? Winter freeze or something like that. Winter dehydration. I didn't know this about some of our plants that we had planted, and the plants that we planted was that like in the winter you have to water the ground because the ground, the first like 12 inches or so, becomes so dry that it'll just dry up the roots and kill the plant. So
Right,
I
right,
didn't
yeah.
think of like, oh yeah, I should water them a couple times during the winter. I didn't think of that, and we almost lost this one really, really nice tree, all because I didn't know that. So then I started watering the heck out of it and trying to get it revived in the summer, and it's different. And like the code down there, like we were replacing one of our deck posts, and they were like, it has to go down at least 24 inches because that's the frost level. And I was like, this is insane. Like I didn't realize the difference in the two areas.
Yeah, yeah. Folks think of Colorado as this beautiful mountainous area, but it's an alpine desert, right? Out here.
Yeah.
It's certainly up against the mountains from the Springs up through Denver and Fort Collins up into Wyoming. And so it is really dry. So we're very happy for the moisture. But
Hmm.
yeah, you've got frost line, then you have some stuff called bentonite that will swell up with water and can actually make it so you can't open a door in your house, and things like that. So yeah, it's pretty crazy living out here, but it's really worth it. So
And you would think, and like I didn't think of it because I was like, the amount of snow we're getting is melting down into the ground. So like the ground's got to be moist. It has to be. Well, I was wrong. Like, no, it's so dry that the water just seems to like go past it or just evaporate up into the air. And I was like, I didn't know that. But yeah, the high plains desert that you drive through on the way in, whether you're coming up from the south or from the east, is you just don't expect that. You expect this lush, beautiful trees everywhere, and it's like you don't realize how much of a dry desert it is until you get closer to the Front Range, and that's when it kind of changes a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely drier than I expected it to be with the amount of snow that it got. So
yeah,
beautiful place, though. I really loved it, and definitely gonna have to make it back there again someday. So, but
absolutely.
let's talk about you, former Green Beret. You did some time in the White House. You've done several deployments. Kind of tell me a little bit about Steve's military career in a nutshell.
Sure. I was born in Northern California, and so when I joined the military, actually I looked at all the services, decided against the Navy because just anything more than a canoe and I'm getting seasick. So uh, so I joined the Army, went to basic in Monterey, beautiful Fort Ord back in the day. And while I was there and taking all these tests for OCS and language school and all this kind of stuff, these guys showed up in the auditorium. And so they took the whole training company and put it in the auditorium. and these guys were in suits and longer hair and talking about this traveling around the world and things like that, but they didn't say a whole lot. And I kept raising my hand. It's like, okay, I can go up to Fort Lewis and crawl around in the mud with the Ranger Regiment, or maybe I can do something in a suit or something different. And later I found out it was White House Communications Agency, provide support to the president, the vice president, and at that time also the other dignitaries that would come through, but mainly president and vice president, communications support. And so I switched from being just a radio man to learning how to repair radios and things like that, and went through Fort Sill to Fort Gordon, where the signal school is, and then up to DC. And my first trip out of the United States was from DC to Paris, Paris to New Delhi, then New Delhi to Bangladesh, Dhaka, Bangladesh.
That's not the worst trip.
Yeah. And having been a kid who was fascinated by National Geographic and everything outside, we got taught history of California all the time. It's like, I don't care. Yeah, there was a gold rush. Thank you. I want to see what's going on in the rest of the world, right? And so, that was one of those, like I talked about in my newsletter, one of those things where, once again, I volunteered and kept sort of raising my hand, and it turned out really well. And that's been something through my whole career, that volunteering for things that other people might be wary about has always worked out for me, and led to some very interesting deployments, trips, and of course training and stuff like that. So,
and you earned your Green Beret, correct?
Well, actually, what I did is after White House Comm, I was in the Secret Service for a couple of years. It was an easy transition. We were supporting the Secret Service and the White House staff, like on trips with communications gear. And so switching over to be a technical specialist, doing alarms video, out on the road, working with EOD teams, right? Making sure areas are clear for the protectee to come through, that kind of thing with the EOD teams. After the 1980 election and being gone like about 300 days, so many days that they couldn't pay me anymore. I was just essentially working for free for food and lodging. Then I decided I needed a break. And that's when I went to Florida and then got involved with the 20th Special Forces, the National Guard. So there's the active duty groups, 1st, 3rd, 7th, 10th, 5th, of course, the fabled 5th, the Legion. And then the 20th and the 19th are the two National Guard groups. Okay. 19th headquartered out of Salt Lake, south of Salt Lake, Camp Williams, and 20th out of actually, I believe it's Mississippi. I forget now, but I was in Maryland. So that allowed me to become a contractor and help stand up Central Command. And when I was there, when SOUTHCOM changed and worked in the J2. So I was a contractor, but then a weekend warrior, right? Mm-hmm. And but going through all the standard classes that other people wanted to earn their Green Beret would go through, all the different training. So I went through weapons training, and I wanted to go through medic training, but they found out I knew a thing or two about radios. So then I became sort of stuck.
That's when they get you, man. If they find, you got to keep those things a secret as best you can, because as you're going through the process, they're looking for volunteers in certain areas. If they know that you know a little something, they'll just snatch you up. That's how I got voluntold for a lot of things, and I was like, I try to keep my mouth shut. But I ended up getting volunteered for those things because, Clark, we know that you know how to do this. I was like, I'm not that good at it. And they're like, no, we know. Like, dang.
Exactly right. So I end up with a 90-pound rucksack with a PSC-3 SATCOM. Like when we would do counter drug missions, I'd have a pager. I'd have an early Motorola flip phone. I'd have a SATCOM, a PSC-3 SATCOM, and the rest of my ruck is batteries, and my friends got to carry my bullets, because I'm just all full of batteries, stuff like that. So yeah, but being in special forces and still being a contractor and stuff like that, really, this comes out in part of my book, is that when I talk about my protagonist working at SOUTHCOM and being able to walk down to the ops center and look for missions for his National Guard team, I actually did that and was able to, because I had the badge, go talk to the right people and get us on these counter-drug missions that were 100% paid. The DEA paid us to go in and do training in an area, aka recon, intelligence gathering, and just report if we found anything. And so those were really good training missions before we went downrange into. My company was predominantly in Ecuador and Colombia. So
it's obvious. I've read the book. You sent me a big arc, which I think is awesome, and thank you again. It's obvious that through the book, a lot of your special forces and your time as a contractor and doing all these different things for your country shine through in the storytelling, which we're going to talk about. But really, when did you decide, I'm gonna write a book? Because I think, if I remember right, this is like your 5th book, but it's the first one being published.
Well, yeah. So the inciting incident, as we call it, right, in book writing, that forms the genesis of the book, actually happened in '93, and I did storylines. I did pages where I had a little picture, and then sort of like they do in when they're doing a movie, those kind of things,
Storyboards, yeah, me too.
Yeah, I did storyboards and other things like that. But finally, my wife in November of 2019 was like, because I'm a big fan, of course, of Jack Carr.
Yeah.
And he had Jack Carr and Taylor and Thor, folks like that. And she said, "Why don't you just write?" And then I just happened about the same time to find Jerry Jenkins, who was in the Black Forest there in Colorado Springs, and did a 6-month intensive with him. Learned a lot about writing and about how much I didn't know, and just started writing then. So in my journey, I signed with Force Poseidon, but the publisher was very specific and said, "Look, I've got a backlog here. Your book's we're not going to get to your book in 6 months or something. It might be upwards of a year or whatever." And I said, "That's great. I'll keep working on it. I'll keep tuning it up, but I'll write other books." And that's what I've done. Is actually, I have 2 more Shadow Tier books that are, I would say, in the 80% range. They definitely need some tune up and stuff like that. But so it's been a short but interesting career. I get up at like 5:30, 4:30 in the morning, actually, most times. And it's when my brain works the best. Have some coffee, and I just can sit and write in the quiet, right? Especially as the sunrise comes up, I like that. So it's been an interesting journey. But yeah, I've used a lot of my experience and our knowledge about other things and intel and operations and things. I've not done everything in the book.
Sure.
I've certainly been in Mexico a lot. I've never invaded Mexico. With a
spoiler alert.
Yeah. Anybody who's listening, please. But yeah. So and some of the places certainly. Actually, I was just in Tampa for SOFIC, the Special Operations Industry Conference, and I took my wife to one of the locations in Ybor City there, the Cuban part of Tampa, and where there's an action scene there. And I took her actually into that bar and stuff like that. And so,
that's cool.
Yeah. we had a good time. So
I
yeah.
saw some of the when you told me like earlier this week that you were at that conference. I started looking on social media, and I didn't realize how intense that conference is. Like, they're no joke flying helicopters, they're driving boats around, they're shooting blanks. They're like, it's not just like a trade show. Come look at all the new gear. Like, they're actually doing things. And I was like, I need to go to this. This
Oh
looks
yeah, they have a great
amazing.
demonstration.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and where they've got Blackhawks, Little Birds.
yeah.
They had a couple of soldiers with the jetpacks on,
Oh,
flying
that's
around.
cool.
Yeah, yeah, and like we saw from the SBS on that one video last year. So yeah, it's a great conference, great place to go find out how much tech has changed, and what's going on in the industry. Um,
I'm sure it's
so
great for research.
absolutely, that's exactly what it was about. Um, so so like I say, the inciting incident for the book, 1993, messed around, but then really got to it in 2019. And yeah, I think I've been through 8 or 9 versions of the book, right, up into the arc, and changing things, and because it's funny, because I tend to want to write a nice easy intro, and the genre would like to have things happening in the first chapter. So I've
Oh
learned
yeah.
a lot about writing in this genre. And I think one of the things I've learned, and feedback from people like you and other people, is that character development's important, right? You can write a whole book of get after it action, but it's what's happening to the characters. And so I was very interested in the character arc for Lance Beowulf, my protagonist, and going from that deepest, darkest place of revenge to actually letting those people live, to do other things. So
Yeah, and it's let's talk about how you came up with Lance, or Wolf, as
mhm.
he's often mentioned. Um, how did you come up with that character specifically, and kind of his background, without giving too much away?
Mhm.
Where did the inspiration for that character particularly come from?
Right. So when you're writing a book, and wanting somebody to publish it, right, one of the things they're looking for is what is going to make the book engaging. What's going to give the book something different, right? We have Mitch Rapp, rock solid, right? Former Secret Service, and et cetera, et cetera. And we've got Brad. We've got Pike Logan, right, for example, or we got James Reese. So what can I do that is maybe similar? People like this in the genre, but a different protagonist and with a different view, so that you can bring in different things. And I thought, that um, there was a book written um, many, many years ago by a famous author whose name escapes me right now. But essentially, it was about a Native American pilot who went down in Siberia, and he has to live, and he's fighting against Russians, trying to live and things like that. And I thought, wow, I've seen that once. Maybe it's time for, a Native American, whether it's somebody like a second or third generation Windtalker family person, right? A guy or gal, whatever. And so I started investigating, and it's interesting because the Crow Nation, right, was very interesting to look into, and their love of the land and the families, and the story about how bighorn sheep and plays into their culture and things like that. The bighorn, hence the Bighorn Mountains, but also they were scouts, and they had chiefs that were interested, well, or understood that were going to have to work with these invaders, these white people coming into their lands and things like that. And so one of the sort of people that I would portray Lance off of was called Chief Plentycoo, and he was actually considered by the rest of the tribes as the chief of chiefs at one point, working back into the government to try and protect Indian rights. So that kind of drew me in, and I love history, and I've sort of toned down the need to find out about the rest of the world and focused in on America, but Native Americans. And so it gave me something interesting, I think, a different view in the protagonist that would be more attached to the land and just have a different viewpoint than, I would, for example. So
I really liked the fact that it was kind of a different spin, because I mean, there's a million, spy novels and military novels out there. It's kind of refreshing to see somebody do something a little different, but at the same time, kind of give credit where credit is due to the fact that in our military, and you know this just as well as I do, we're a very diverse bunch of people. We'll come from all walks of life, all countries. Like, I think there's plenty of times where I was probably the minority in the room, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that negatively, but I'm saying that because there was all kinds of different people in the room with me, and we were all kind of focused on this same mission. And a lot of times in the country today, we get very divisive, and it's people don't realize the truth is. And the truth is, there are places where we're not divided at all. We're actually hand in hand working together. So it was really cool to see. It's obvious that throughout the book, your experience shined through, but it was really cool to see you kind of change up the main character a little bit. And a lot of main characters work for the CIA, they work for the president, and there's nothing, not saying anything bad about those. They all got their, uniqueness to them, but it was really cool to see you do that. It kind of reminded me how Don Bentley did Matt Drake working for the Defense Intelligence Agency. So it wasn't CIA. He kind of had a little bit more free reign. And I just finished Hostile Intent, his newest one. That's why I mentioned it. But it's a great one because it seems like he has like a freedom with Matt Drake. He's not tied to a lot of the kind of typical story arcs of a lot of the male protagonists in the genre.
right.
And especially in this one, and I don't want to give too much away, but if you haven't read Hostile Intent, for those listening, or anything by Don Bentley, it's really, really good stuff. And he really gets Matt Drake into a lot of trouble in this.
He does.
I mean,
He does.
it seems like every time he turns around, he's getting punched in the face. Like he was in so much trouble in this one that I was like, oh my God, like,
I don't think he can go back to Vienna, right?
No, he absolutely cannot go back. Like, it's out of the question. But yeah, so it was really refreshing to see you kind of do a different perspective on it. Now, let me ask you this though. Given the fact that you were doing something so different, was there any hesitancy to think, maybe this won't go over as well because it's so different? Or were you confident that you could build this and that it would go over just fine?
Well, I don't know about confident, but I knew that oftentimes, I mean, I most of the time I wasn't thinking about let's do something different, but just on the edge,
Yeah.
because one of the great examples of doing the same thing but different is when you've got Tom Hanks marooned on an island talking to Wilson, and then you've got in the Martian, you've got him marooned on Mars talking to potatoes and things like that, or into the video and stuff, right? So very similar story, Castaway, and
typical Survivor type of story.
Yeah. But totally different views, right? Different takes on it. And so, for example, I mean, I wrote what I knew, and I knew, just like you said, you not only get diversity, like in the National Guard, right? You've got doctors, lawyers, you've got cops, you've got carpenters, plumbers, all these kind of things. And I just had dinner. With my friend who is really LeBlanc in the book. And so once you'll read that, you'll understand he's from Louisiana and all. And so he's excited. He was actually telling his daughter, "Oh, look, here I am," in the book and things like that. So it wasn't a conscious thought, but just talking about using the National Guard and reserves as a way to build a different type of unit versus trying to create more tier one operators, which are the top 2% of even all, right? So SEAL Team 6, Delta, they're the top 2% of all Navy SEALs, AFSOC, MARSOC, Army SOC, SOF, right? Rangers, and what we call white side SEALs or white side Green Berets, like I was. You know, it just is all that diversity. And, you know, once you're on the team, I mean, it's like, you're my brother, right? We don't care.
Yeah.
You have all that diversity in a room. I've like you have been in rooms that people from every corner of the world are in the room, and probably even some, you know, partner nation country people too. So, I wanted to portray that and give some relevance to that idea that there's so much diversity and so much other capability in the National Guard and the reserves that often doesn't get thought of, because we have, you know, all these active duty people doing it day in, day out for us. So.
Well, there's that stigma that the Guard and Reserve just party on the weekends. You know, that's what they do. You know, and it's not true. It's not true at all. My brother-in-law is in the Guard. He's active Guard Reserve, and you know, he does his thing Monday through Friday. I mean, he works harder than just about anybody else I know. So their role, the role that Guard and Reserve play, from, you know, the admin guys all the way up to the tier one operators, is critically important to what we do on a broader military strategy and scope of work. Especially, you know, there's a lot of things that the Guard and Reserve can do for international type of affairs, which you kind of get into in the book about how those kind of things work and crossing certain lines. Obviously, Wolf gets himself into some hot water quickly and then often. But I really like how you used him as a character. He seemed gritty. He seemed edgy. He pushed his luck. There's almost a little bit of a, I don't want to say immaturity, but kind of, there's those times where he wasn't thinking solidly with his head and he had to kind of get pulled back, but it was that dynamic between wanting revenge and needing to be smart. And really good book. I when it comes out on 14 June, correct?
Yes, 14
June. Everybody needs to go get a copy. You can pre-order it now. But so let's talk about some of the promotion you've done, because in this genre, this military spy thriller genre, you really got to separate yourself, because it seems like there's a lot of books out there. Not that it's a bad thing, you know, for a reader like me and yourself and other people. There's several books you can buy every single month. You could easily read 25 to 100 books a year probably, and not even touch everything. But you've done some different stuff with the promotion, like Steve Squibbs. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I have a really well experienced and smart, innovative organization I work with called Btb Designs. So James Apt has been doing this for a while. He does it for brand name people, and so I hired him, and he dramatically improved my website, which I was hacking around with. I mean, I work in cybersecurity, but I building a website and
totally different.
Like you and I talk, man, it's hard.
Yeah,
you've done amazing things in automating, and
well, I had to call in an expert too. Let me not take too much of the credit. I had to. Well, my first website was not that awesome. It was very bare bones, but I called in an expert and paid them to redo it, and then kind of give me some training, so then I knew kind of what to look for, what to do, kind of like what you did. I had to get the expertise, because what I thought looked cool, she was like, no.
Yeah, exactly. And so he makes it actually very easy. So he redesigned the website, took a lot of the imagery that I'd gotten from different places and paid the royalty for, and then he set up a monthly schedule and sends me a worksheet, and I create content, you know, top 5 recipes or top 5. This month was pistols, right? And by the way, I did not include a 1911 in my top 5 pistols because I
I
didn't want to be
noticed that.
that old boomer guy, with the 45.
I
Uh,
noticed that. I was like, oh,
but
he's
I
missing.
will say on the air for everybody, I'm not a fan of Beretta, mainly because not because it's not a great efficient pistol, but it didn't fit my hand well. So when I talk about Lance carries an old style Browning high power, that's because that pistol fits my hand, and I don't have to practice to shoot it well. I can just shoot it well. Um, so James has this worksheet. So I create content at the start of the month, and then he uses it to uh, push out. When it came to the ARC and the giveaway, um, once again, I was looking around and people give away lots of nice things with ARCs. You get a free book. Sometimes, you're starting to see more coins, some morale patches, things like that. And I'd already made a coin. I had 3-inch morale patch and a 2-incher. And I thought, what can I do differently? And I looked around and said, well, what resources do I have? Well, we have a cabin up near Breckenridge in Colorado. It's right on 14 miles of some of the best trout fishing in Colorado. There's ponds, there's Tarryall Reservoir, right? Just down the road from us is I think it's called Lake George, closer to Colorado Springs. And so we got all this area. What if I was to pay and in my work as a contractor, I have, millions of miles. I've got air miles. I've got hotel rooms and all that kind of things for spending all the money with those folks. What if I was to combine some of that and have the giveaway be free fishing with Steve in Colorado? And James went like, holy smokes, never heard of this idea before. And that's how we came up with the idea and brought it forward. So, it really just, looking around, what assets do I have and how can I differentiate, like you said, right? I'm a brand new, nobody's heard of me author. Some people are giving me very nice reviews about the ARC, knowing that it's not the fully edited version. But so I'm very happy with that. But once again, as a newbie, right, you got to get your name out there and hopefully people pick it up and push it out. So.
Yeah, I really like I like the new newsletter, the website. All the branding seems to be tied together now. I love the interacting that you've done with people, especially with the feedback on like the playlist, the music playlist. That was a really good idea. You seem to get a lot of feedback on that. Kind of pulled back the curtain a little bit on like kind of like what's motivating you, what's the tone of the book going to kind of be. I thought that was really, really cool. Giving me a lot of ideas and different things to do. It's kind of hard to, obviously the big authors, Jack Carrs and Brad Taylors and Don Bentley's, these guys go on book tours, so they'll have 6 or 7 stops, and then you get to go meet them and interact with them, give them a high five, a hug, handshake, and take a picture with them. That's their interaction with the readers. Obviously, smaller readers or first time authors don't necessarily have that. So we got to find different ways to do things and interact with people until you can get to that point. But I thought it was really cool how you did the playlist, how you're giving away the fishing trip. It really seemed to get people interacted in. But what was the fun part about the playlist though? Because you got a lot of feedback on that.
Yeah. I am one of those folks that will hear a song and go back to a memory. Right. And so, there are a couple of songs. I mean, one of the very first song I thought of when writing the book was "In the Air Tonight," right? The classic Miami Vice
Yeah, it's a good one.
soundtrack, right? Yeah, I can remember we used to just stop on Fridays and whatever we were doing and go watch Miami Vice, and but that I remember that at one point, I think it was the 82nd, had actually done a video and they included paradrops and stuff like, we're coming for payback. Yeah, so um, on Lance's journey. And when I was thinking of the playlist, I was thinking of essentially Lance's journey, right? Start off with "Who Are You" and some of the other songs like that, and then it gets a bit darker, and then he's finding out what's going on, and then hopefully it goes dark, and then it comes back out. You sort of see that in the full playlist. But some of those songs, meant things to me at different times like that, and or somebody else happened to mention, and I went and checked on it and stuff, and yeah, I had a really fun time with that, and hopefully it followed the different acts of the book. You could see
Yeah,
that.
it did. As I was reading it, I was checking on the playlist, just from an analytical standpoint of like, how did the music tone up to the book? I can't listen to music. My inspiration comes from like the middle of nowhere. So like if I get a thought, I have to write it down. When I'm trying to focus on something, whether it's writing an academic paper or it's writing, something I'm working on as a project, I almost need kind of silence. I can't even listen to podcasts because I got to be zoned in. You know what I mean? So it's not that I don't have inspiration from any of those places. I don't have it in the moment. You know what I mean? Like,
No,
maybe,
I'm the same way. I'm too ADHD because
yeah,
I'll
I
be
just
in
can't.
the middle of writing a paragraph, and then I'll be listening to the song and the lyrics. Yeah, yeah, I do this when I'm writing. I sit down to write like a chapter, and it's I'm drawn to movement. It's sort of a protective skill, being drawn to movement, and the wife will poke her head in or something, or I'll see even my phone upside down will light up, and I'll be like, "What?" And I'm going to check it, and then I got to get back into what I'm doing. So, yeah,
I think for me, it's like an analytical type of thing. Like if I'm going to listen to like, Jack Carr was recently on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I really wanted to listen to it. It's like a 2 hour long listen. But I want to listen to it because, Jack's going to drop some knowledge. He's going to drop some gems and things I can learn from. And so I can't do anything. I need to sit there and just watch or just listen, so, um, it's almost a focus type of thing. Now, when I'm doing academic papers, I can write and listen to something at the same time,
Mhm.
especially music, because it kind of just keeps the energy going. But it seems like on some of the fiction stuff I've been working on, I really got to sit here and just kind of focus. I almost need to like ingrain myself into what I'm writing and see it. I'm a visual person, so like I almost see it cinematically, like I'm making a movie, and I need to write what I'm seeing,
Yes.
and kind of bring that together. And we talked about storyboarding earlier. That was one of my big things, was doing storyboards in different acts, and like, how do I see this? Like, is it dark? Is it light? What's the painting on the wall like? All that kind of stuff to try to visualize it. And I love listening to music. I just can't do it when I'm writing certain things.
Well, yeah, I get a lot of books on audio because it's 2 hours to our cabin, so I'll be listening. But a couple of times, I'm like, yank the wheel over and pull over on the side of the road, and I'll back it up and go, "Did you hear that? Did you hear what he said?" And it'd be a podcast or something out of a book. It's like, whoa, that's you know that kind of line that captures you. And
Hmm.
yeah, the visualization. It's funny, when I was doing that 6 months with Jerry, the first time he looked at my writing and said, we're talking about writing a book, not a TV show, right?" And
Yeah,
I thought, well, maybe that's a plus, but not here or something. But same kind of idea. So I have so many different points of view all in the same chapter.
that was my problem.
Yeah, yeah.
I hired someone to edit like the first 10 pages. And I just said, I need to know if I'm on the right track, if I've even got a future in this, or if this is just a dumpster fire. And they were like, dude, this is awesome stuff, but you're all over the place. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, you gotta have one voice. You gotta have one perspective the whole time. You need to learn how to do that. And they just gave me a lot of tips and pointers. He's actually Jonas Saul. He's an author, and he's published like 40 books or something like that. Super good dude. He could have just sent a little blurb back in an email and said, work on these things. Good storyline. I like it. Work on these things. Nah, he sent me like this 5-page email of, for free too. just beating it up, but giving me pointers like, you do this here, you do that here, change this voice here. And it was like, okay. And that changed it for me because now I'm a kind of guy like I just write. I don't worry about grammar. I don't worry about spelling. I don't worry about voice, any of that crap. I just put it down on paper. And then when I go back through, I'm looking at the story part. I'm analyzing that, and because I'm saying things in present tense and past tense, and that's stuff you could fix easily. For me, it's getting it out. I need to get it out, get it documented, and then go back through and do it. And that was the biggest thing for me was in the writing, and then of course studying. Reading books by Jack Carr, Brad Thor, Don Bentley, and all those guys, and going back and reading them and saying, okay, this was in that voice and this was in that voice, and just trying to learn was the big thing for me because I was all over the place too. Because I saw it like a fan, like I was watching a movie, and you don't realize how hard it is to write fiction. Like I thought it would be a lot easier than it is. It's hard.
Yeah, I'm finding after having the same issue you're talking about that I can structure the story so I've got this viewpoint, right, in this chapter, or maybe two viewpoints and the nice little asterisk in between to say, okay, we're changing POV here, because it's just a little section it fits or it ties in or something like that. But staying much closer to what people consider the right way to do a fiction book. And now I'm a big outliner, and my wife has over 1,000 cookbooks, and we've got a whole wall of cookbooks. But I use the bookcases to put my sticky notes and have my plot lines. And it's like, wait a minute, I got to get from here down to here to the bad guy and back up the lance or whatever. And but once I have that, and I know what I'm talking about relatively in each chapter, because sometimes it does change, then I sort of pants in between and go in and do things. And sometimes I end up different, have to make a change, but I like where I've come. And so I do the same thing. When I use Pro Writing Aid,
I do too.
Back, right? We've talked about it. It's a great tool. I use Pro Writing Aid. It comes back and it has this little smiley face, and it tells me that I still haven't figured out commas and things like that. Not too bad on the spelling anymore, but yeah. So it is. I love that process, and for me, it's a creative, innovative process, and I love that. But when I'm really in the middle of it, I'm not listening to music, not a podcast. I'm in my office or up at the cabin and just letting it wail. Get up, walk around, do whatever. I'm really focused like that too.
So let's talk about Shadow Tier. Obviously, we don't want to give anything away, but this is a story of revenge. And for certain reasons that we won't say out loud because people need to go read the book. But this is a story of revenge and kind of how he bounces back and forth between seeking revenge and trying to be smart about things without he gets himself in hot water quickly, but then he tries to keep himself from getting into hot water, but he seems to keep getting into hot water, even though when people are warning him, like, you're getting into hot water again. Like, what are you doing? Is really motivated by revenge. So obviously your counter drug and your training missions and things you did with SOUTHCOM come into play. But what is next after this story of revenge? What's the next one or two look like? What's the theme for those?
Yeah, so I wrote them out of sequence. I had an idea and I just went with it. But having a second book where it's somebody wanting revenge on Lance is often seen as too early. So the second book you'll see an expansion of the team. It's had this initial win, and of course it continues to go on. And you're now several years later, and we're now in Afghanistan, right? And number one producer of opium in the world. So one of the squadrons is downrange, is in Kabul, and then moves out of Kabul because it's just crazy. And they're sort of watching, they're in the process of watching the DEA do what they did in Vietnam, which is not effective. And, we spent a lot of money trying to prosecute the counterterrorism fight while trying to do something about the opium in Afghanistan. And oftentimes there were Marine units that were just confused about what they were supposed to be doing on a certain day, were they just hanging around waiting for somebody else to eradicate the crop, or were they really going to go prosecute the CT mission? So that's going on. And so I like complex stories, and maybe I'm a little too Webb Griffin or Clancy in this, but so they're looking at these kinds of things going on, and I'm able to tie in real events that happened in the 2003 time range, things like that. And so they're involved in some of that activity because there was actually a foreign nation mission that went after a big opium processing site. So they get engaged with that. But the chatter starts up, and they see signs that somebody's trying to reconstitute the Marseille mafia, where the French connection came from. So you've got things going on at home with Lance, like up in Montana, because as of this date right now, there are signs that the cartels are trying to marry into some of the Indian tribes to gain status in these different nations on these reservations, because they're less policed. What a great place to do things, right?
Yeah,
do your
and
business.
that's real.
And that's real. Yeah, absolutely. And so I've got things that are real today, some things from 2003 that are going on, and then this idea that somebody's trying to bring the French connection back. And so Lance is like, how do I, right? Because he's almost like a Clark. He's now up a few steps, right? Then Mr. Clark, he's not director of operations at the CIA or anything, but he's up and he's got to be directing, not going on missions. And Kennedy his buddy keeps reminding, you're a director. You know what that means, right? This Marseille thing's coming up. So how do I handle this? And he just smiles to himself and says, rainbow. And so if you remember the book, right, Rainbow Six, he remembers the book. And so they stand up another squadron in the UK. And I won't give away the whole book again, but they do some interesting things that you wouldn't think of a normal organization doing to fight the Marseille mafia, and also this idea of being an epicenter for Afghani opium to come back into Europe and then make it into New York in the United States. And so it gets tied in with casinos and other things. And so I'm a big reader. So there are things that go on and things that I see in different reports of things that were stopped. For example, somebody had created this business with no name. You could have a locker, like a bus stop or an airport locker kind of idea at a casino, and it had no name on it. Just you had a code. Nobody else had the code, and I could give you the code, and we could use that as a transshipment spot, right? So
nobody'd be the wiser.
No, I could just put baggage in there. You pick the baggage up. Of course, it's full of cocaine or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. So I apply those kind of real life things into the book. So that's the second book. The third one then is somebody from Lance's past who they thought they had killed, comes back, and he's a bioweapons scientist. So you see elements of the devil's hand in it, that kind of thing. Bit different approach, and it mostly takes place up around Lake Shasta, Chico, Sacramento, and San Francisco.
Back to your old stomping grounds, kind of.
Exactly, back in that part of Northern California, and so yeah, fun to write about that. So that's the third book. still has an element of El Chapo in it, of course, and the cartels. And what we worried about a lot during the GWOT was the cartels working with, still do worry about this. They're so good at moving product. What if that product's a terrorist, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, it's gone from, international sales of illegal things, have really jumped off. And it seems like, to talk about, I'm by no means an expert, but I've read a lot and done a lot of research. But it seems like the tighter we squeeze on some of these illegal businesses trafficking things, the smarter they get about trying to dodge those efforts. And some of those things they've done is, instead of trafficking drugs, well, we know that they're looking for us trafficking drugs. We're going to traffic this or that because they're not looking for that. And it's almost been like the counterpart of it has turned into new strategies on the other side. And, everything's, they're hawking everything nowadays. I mean, stuffing drugs into pins, stuffed animals, the craziest things you've ever seen. And just everything seems to be illegal now, from drugs to music to people to, all kinds of stuff. And it's
Yeah.
cool to see someone kind of dig into that a little bit more, because a lot of times people think about the top two things that get, traded illegally, which is drugs and guns.
Mhm.
you know and people kind of tend to stick to that, and it's cool to see something maybe bring out a little bit more of that real world, like, hey, you don't realize how dangerous the world is and the amount of things that are illegally moved around the globe by
Yeah.
people you don't expect.
Well, you saw that in the book, right? At
Mm-hmm.
the logistics facility when they went into the trailer and they found a different type of product.
Yep.
Big thing right now, of course, is fentanyl, and it comes from China right into the ports there, where the cartels own the ports there in Mexico, and we do a deal with an agreement with China to stop sending fentanyl. What do? They send all the precursors, so the pharmaceutical companies can still make fentanyl, the legal ones, but the cartel can do the same. They can intercept and get the same precursors and still make fentanyl. And now we have blues and other things killing kids all over the place here. 15-20% increase in fentanyl related death just over the last year. So yeah, they're experts at the illegal movement of just about anything. Um, we have some technical means and capabilities that are very good at certain things, but not just not well protected base drugs that there's nothing in the air to sniff or ionize or radiate.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell. So, yeah, it's scary. And the Sinaloa cartel, one of the most adaptive businesses ever on the planet, just moving up from marijuana to not only moving cocaine for the Colombians, but also then starting to grow their own, right? And then even to the point now with the switch over, where cocaine is sort of decreased in its demand signal, we've got now a higher demand signal back again now for heroin, and it's a social change on who's using it and things like that, and microdosing and all these kind of things. So yeah, they're driven to find, like, when we see the Coast Guard stopping one of these semi-submersibles, I'm just wondering how many full up submersibles, old diesel boats, whatever submarines are getting by, right? We've never done anything more than scratch the surface. And that was one of
Oh,
the
yeah.
ideas, was in the first book, one of the main plot lines is that, we've been prosecuting the drug war for a long time. This guy named Wolf here is making a little bit of a difference here. Maybe we should think things differently.
So 14 June is when the book's coming out. You can pre-order the ebook now. People should definitely go pick up the when's the paperback going to be available?
Yeah, unfortunately, because small time press. It's 14 June is when you'll see paperback and hardback, and then we'll figure out a way to make sure that if you want a signed copy, that I can get it, sign it, and send it off to you, that kind of thing like that. But yeah, it'll be right now. You can pre-order the audio book, the Kindle, whatever, but not the audio book. I'm sorry, but the Kindle version.
The ebook, yeah.
Yeah, the ebook. Right. Yeah.
So go get the ebook right now. Tune in on 14 June. Pick up the hardcover, pick up a paperback to go with your e-reader copy, and then you get all three of them. But Steve, where else, before we kind of cut off, and thank you again for coming on, tell people where they should go to find out more about Steve Stratton, Shadow Tier, and what's going on in the future.
Sure. It says Steven Stratton USA.com or Stratton Books on Twitter. And I got a Facebook page too. It's essentially doing the same thing as we're doing on the website and getting information out. But I'd love to have folks. We've still got some time for the art giveaway if you want to sign up and work towards a chance for that free fishing trip here in Colorado. And then also, like I sent Jeff, you can get a copy of the ARC, get a morale patch, and see what it's all about.
Yeah, still got time. Obviously, 14 June is when it's going to come out. Steve, thanks again for coming on. I appreciate it. It's great to talk and kind of catch up. I wish you the best. Keep me posted on how I can help with Shadow Tier. And of course, I'm going to be one of your bigger advocates and say, hey, go pick it up. And I'll let you kind of leave off with that, whatever plug you want to leave off for the audience.
Well, the plug I'd like to leave off for is actually Jeff's book on leadership. I am a big fan of growing the next group of leaders. Leadership is so important. I was taught by so many great people, lucky to have mentors who guided me. And not that I do leadership perfectly, but I think really Hear These Truths is a book that if you're in the least bit interested in leadership, or you want to become a leader, not just a manager, but an actual leader of people, and do good things and achieve great things for you and your family and your company, your country, get Jeff's book.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And again, 14 June, definitely go pick up Shadow Tier. Obviously my book's coming out soon, and I appreciate the shout out, Steve. And it was great talking to you, man. And thanks for coming on again.
Thank you. Take care.